Welcome back. How we doing, Giants fans? It's the first video for me in the offseason, so it's kind of sad, but I guess every team does have the offseason eventually. I was just hoping that ours would be in mid-February, not now, but it is what it is. All right, so today we're going to talk about the press conference that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll had. I will talk about some of the takeaways I had. They didn't reveal too much. They revealed a little bit, and I'll kind of touch on that, kind of speculate. And in the second half of this video, I'm going to talk about a Colin Cowherd clip talking about Daniel Jones and making an analogy about him. And I saw some other people react to it. I'm going to react to this myself. So here we are. So I'm going to react to that and interrupt when I feel the need to. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like, always helps out, and let's get into it. All right, so my reaction to what they said today, mostly Joe Schoen. I mean, Brian Daboll we hear from every week, but of course when the GM speaks, it's pretty important, especially in an offseason like this where it's like some big decisions have to be made. So he did admit to talking to Saquon Barkley and Julian Love during the bye week for contract extensions. We knew about Saquon. He kind of spilled the beans on that one during the bye week, but I don't think we knew about Julian Love until now. I'm not sure if they feel the same way about those guys. And, Love's play in the second half kind of tailed off. Of course, he was known for that bad whiff on the Devontae Smith fourth down play. But the guy had a good year overall. I think he's a very good depth player. But, the Giants don't have, a ton of resources, a.k.a. cap space, to spend on guys like that. So if Julian Love gets money elsewhere, then, it is what it is. But I'd like to see him back if they can afford it. And for Saquon Barkley, it seemed like at the bye week when Joe Schoen was doing his interviews and things like that, it seemed like he was 100% sold on wanting Saquon Barkley back. But Saquon in the second half had some down games. He kind of looked a bit beat up and a bit worn down. And maybe Joe Schoen changed his mind. I don't know. Just based on his reaction during this press conference, it seemed like Joe Schoen was less committal to a guy like Saquon Barkley. So I don't know what to think now. He basically said, look, we have a price, and if the player doesn't want to go to that price or wants to go above that price, then we're not afraid to move on. That's pretty much what Joe Schoen was saying. I'm sure he put it in a much more polite way, but he will not get played by a player. He will not get played, Joe Schoen. He will set his price, and if you are over that price, he's not going to take it. I'm sure there will be some negotiating going on for Saquon, for Daniel Jones, for Julian Love, and whoever else they want to negotiate with. But I don't think Saquon's going to come to the Giants and say, "Hey, I want $15 million per year," and Joe Schoen will be like, "Okay," and just give it to him. That's not going to happen. So the reported offer by the Giants during the bye week was about $12.5 million per year, and according to what Joe Schoen said, they weren't that close. So it seems like based on what Saquon wants and what Joe Schoen wants, they might be a bit further off than what we had anticipated during the bye week. So, Saquon's going to be 26 next year. He's a running back who's had, 2 or 3 injuries in his career. Of course, the major ACL injury. So did I say ACL, MCL? I said ACL, right? I don't know. But yeah, ACL tear. But yeah, I don't mind if he walks. I completely get it. I'm not going to be butthurt about that one because we know that most second contracts for running backs, we know how that goes. McCaffrey has been banged up throughout most of his second contract. We know about Zeke. We know about Gurley. Some guys have worked out, of course. Like Derrick Henry hasn't been too bad, of course. But I would say majority of these big second running back contracts, Le'Veon Bell, another one, they don't go too well. So I don't really care what happens with that. Just don't overpay. That's pretty much my takeaway. Whether it's Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley, I don't mind if they're back, obviously, but just don't overpay. I know some fans want to give Daniel Jones 4 years, $120 million, and X amount of guaranteed money. I don't want that. You know what I mean? I don't want, the 4-year commitment where Daniel Jones, if he sucks next year, is going to screw up our cap space for the next 2 or 3 years. I don't want that. I would prefer a Daniel Jones contract for, 2 years and $45 million, but according to some people, it's going to cost more than that. And if it were me, I would just see what other teams give him that offer. And if they do make that offer, I would try to match it if I think it's appropriate. But, I wouldn't just hand out Daniel Jones 4 years, $120 million and say, all right, here you go, blank check. I wouldn't do that. I would see what teams out there would want to give Daniel Jones that money. And if he gets it, he gets it. And the Giants, of course, they could have a chance to match it. I'm sure Daniel Jones wants to be a Giant next year, and I'm sure the Giants want to bring him back. I mean, at least I think so. So it just all depends on the price. They're not going to overpay. So that's pretty important. I think Schoen, he sees the big picture. I tweeted that today. I do love hearing that. He recognized that there is a talent gap between the Giants and the Eagles. He does not look at the record of 9-7-1 and winning a playoff game and go, all right, we're Super Bowl contenders. Like, no, Joe Schoen knows the process that has to be done here. I think we know next year there could be some natural regression, the same way that Leonard Williams, his sack total regressed from 2020 to 2021. These things happen. The Giants won a lot of one-score games this year. I mean, who knows? Maybe the Giants are not as lucky next year in these one-score games, and maybe their record next year is 7-9-1 or some shit. I don't know. Like, you never know. It could be the complete opposite. So, the Giants had a lot of close wins this year. You can't expect to get over 9 wins next year. It'd be nice, but you can't bank on it. I think Joe Schoen recognizes where this team is at, and he saw that playoff game versus Philly and said, wow, we are not even close to those guys. And that's the right way to look at it, because the Giants, honestly, did not belong on the same field as them. Whether it was the playoff game or the game back in week 14 or whatever, when Philly won that game like 44-20 something, like, or what was it, 44-21, 44-20. Ugly game. So I think Joe Schoen gets it. He understands where this team is at, understands the timeline. He gets all that stuff. I love hearing that. He kept mentioning cap health and having a walkaway number. So as I mentioned, he's definitely going to set prices on these guys. And if they're asking for too much, then that's it. You know, if the Giants have to roll out next year with a backup running back and some quarterback not named Daniel Jones, I think they'll do that. They would rather do that than overpay for guys. They don't want to screw up the cap space for the future. And I do think it's in the best interest for Daniel Jones to come back to the Giants because this was his most successful season. Brian Daboll's system is very favorable for him. Like, just come back. Why not? I get it. You're a player. You got to get your money, but the Giants will give Daniel Jones a fine offer. It may not be exactly what he wants, but I'm assuming the Giants will give Daniel Jones at least a multi-year deal, 2 or 3 years, and somewhere like around $20 million per year. And if Jones thinks he's worth way more than that, then, as I said, so be it. Then you might have to play elsewhere. I really don't care at that point. So if I had to guess right now, my prediction would be that the Giants give Jones a contract extension, but not like a massive one. I would guess it's like 3 years and $65-70 million. Like, that would be my guess. Maybe I'm a bit under, but I don't know. I don't see the 4 years 120. I don't see that happening, and maybe it happens. And as for Saquon, I say he gets franchise tagged. I think that's very possible. Of course, Saquon may be disgruntled. They may have to trade him after, but I think right now that might be the direction they want to go in. And also, I don't see the Giants spending a lot of money this offseason. The Giants do have like between $50 and $60 million in cap space. Of course, like $10 million of that goes to the draft class. You're going to have X amount go to Saquon and Daniel Jones. So the Giants won't have that much left over after all that. But I do think, based on the comments today, that they don't really want to spend a whole lot this offseason. They may add one pretty big player, but I don't see the Giants having like a 2016 or 2020 type spending spree. That seems like a next offseason or the offseason after type thing. I don't see that being this offseason. So I could be wrong, but I just don't think it makes sense right now. And I think Joe Schoen's playing the long game here, so I don't see that being the case. He also mentioned he wants to improve everywhere. It's not just the Giants are a wide receiver one away. I mean, I know some fans have that mindset, but Joe Schoen recognizes that this team has holes on a lot of places. You can run down the list right now. Interior offensive line, maybe a tight end upgrade. Wide receivers in there, obviously. Maybe a backup running back if Breda moves on or like retires or something. I don't know. Then you have defense, cornerbacks. You have a bunch of linebackers you need, an extra pass rusher because, guys don't stay healthy. So there's a lot of needs on this team, and I think Schoen does recognize that. It's not just like, hey, we need a wide receiver and everything's solved. Like, that's not going to be the case. So we'll see. It's going to be very fascinating what happens with these negotiations. Of course, I think the deadline to get a deal done before franchise tags have to happen is like March 7th. So if they don't get something done before then, maybe you will have to franchise Daniel Jones, which, like, I wouldn't love that, but I would rather have a 1-year commitment to that guy than have a multi-year commitment. So I guess it's not too bad, but it also is like $32 million of a cap hit, so that's the downside to it. But the 1-year commitment part it's also not too bad either. But I've been saying this since the Colts game. I think Jones probably deserves another year. I don't think he'll make like another massive jump next year, but like you may as well see what you have, because the Giants, unless they trade up for a quarterback, don't really have many other options. Like, I don't know, you could run it next year with Tyrod or someone like that, but like it's not gonna matter. You know what I mean? Like, unless Jones is asking for a stupid amount of money, like $40-something million per year, there's no reason to get him off the team right now. Like, you may as well, if it's a reasonable contract for Jones, you should bring him back for next year at least, or give him a 2 or 3 year deal, one where you can get out of it after a year if things go south. But there's no reason to roll next year with Tyrod if you don't need to. Like, I don't think we want to sit through that. We know Tyrod has an injury history too, so you don't want to go through that, obviously. But, Joe Schoen, he's not going to completely show his hand at this podium today. There may be a guy that they end up loving in the draft, and they just don't tell us about it, and they might just say, all right, Jones, you can go, and we'll trade up for our guy, and then that's it. Like, you never know how it's going to go. But I would say the most likely scenario right now is that Jones is back on a 2 or 3 year deal. I'd lean more towards 3. And I would say Saquon gets franchised. That's what I guess right now here on January 23rd. So we'll see what happens as the offseason goes on. But it's going to be fun. All right, so speaking of that, I will have a free agency video at some point. I do want to see how it all plays out first with the franchise tags and things like that. I do want to make a Giants grades video for like the entire season, so grading every important player. So I'll get to that too. But yeah, so that's going to do it for this portion, but we'll listen to the Colin Cowherd clip now, and we'll react to that, and hopefully you guys enjoy that part.
So let's say your kid's really struggling in school, and so you're like, okay, I'm going to get him the best tutor possible. He's failing. And the tutor gets the grade up to a C. A is not realistic. B is overly hopeful.
So far, this sounds a lot like me in school.
But the tutor, you got the best tutor in town, get your son to a C+, you feel pretty good. But let's be realistic. It's not getting you into the Ivy League, okay? So I see all this optimism with Daniel Jones. He got the best tutor to save his career. His career was done. He was awful. All
right, so it's a simple analogy so far. So Daniel Jones is the kid. Brian Daboll's the tutor here. I get what he's saying. Hey, listen. Does Daniel Jones have this type of year without Brian Daboll? You can argue no. I would not argue that. Like, I think Brian Daboll is a big reason for Daniel Jones' turnaround, but we'll see where this video goes. I mean, so far it's making some sense. And by the way, this was posted after the Vikings game, so this was like before the Eagles game even happened, just an FYI.
With an elite left tackle, one of the game's best, with a star running back, one of the league's best, with a guy that's going to win Offensive Coach of the Year, a brilliant offensive mind, Daniel Jones threw 15 touchdown passes and was behind Davis Mills and Taylor Heineke in passing yards per game. By the way, it's not a little thing to have a star running back, a brilliant offensive coach, and a great left tackle. They are missing a number one receiver. They got a bunch of 2s and 3s. They're okay, but they don't really have a guy, a Jamar Chase, a Justin Jefferson. For the record, most teams don't.
So this part's interesting. He talks about the 15 touchdown passes in this offense, like barely over 3,000 passing yards. He was saying like Davis Mills, Taylor Heineke had more. I mean, all right, but he said the Giants have some 2s and 3s at wide receiver. I mean, Isaiah Hodgins on a good day is maybe a 2, like maybe. That's very borderline. I think Colin's giving a bit too much credit to the wide receivers, though. I will be honest. He did say he has a superstar running back, a star left tackle. I agree with that stuff, definitely. Has a great play caller in Brian Daboll. Like, I agree with this for the most part. I do think sometimes it's overblown how bad the Daniel Jones situation is. I mean, you look at your franchise left tackle, you have a great running back who was carrying the offense the first half of the year. It's not as bad as people make it out to be sometimes, but I think saying the Giants have a bunch of 2s at wide receiver, it's not really being completely honest.
But Brian Daboll saved a disaster of a career. He was flunking the class. So it's interesting. What did Daboll do with Daniel Jones? He clearly doesn't think he's a dynamic passer. How do I know that? Because what he really did was clean up all of his god-awful mistakes and asked him to run more. If you think somebody's got a great arm, you let him throw 42 times. What he really did is, okay, you're making 2 mistakes a game. I'm going to cut out the mistakes. I'm going to raise your ceiling, and I'm going to have you run 17 times against the Vikings. That was more than Barkley. I think Saquon Barkley ran like a little more than half that. So
this is where he kind of starts to lose me. I would love my quarterback to throw 40-something times a game, but I'll be honest, the Giants' record in games where Jones threw the ball a lot, it was not very good. The Giants, as I mentioned, they don't have great receivers. They're more of a running football team. Now, I agree with one part and disagree with one part. So he was giving Dable credit for limiting Jones's turnovers. I, sadly enough, give credit to Joe Judge and Jason Garrett for that. I mean, those are the guys that really took the turnovers away from Daniel Jones. It got better. I mean, this was Daniel Jones's best year, in terms of lack of turnovers, but it was going down every year. I think Joe Judge and Jason Garrett put an emphasis on it, and of course, Brian Dable being the much better play caller, it just brought both worlds together, and it made Daniel Jones have the best year of his career. But the rushing part, Daniel Jones did have the most rushing yards in his career this year. It was like over 700. I think the most he's had before this was like maybe 400 something. I know he's never played a full season before, and this time he did, so that helps. But he's right about that part. The rushing attack, Daniel Jones using his legs more, that is true. But the whole crediting Dable for taking away his turnovers, honestly, I think that's part of the previous regime.
In the end, when I see all this optimism for Daniel Jones, let's not pretend they don't have anything. They have the best defensive coordinator, arguably in the sport, the best new offensive mind in the sport in Brian Dable, an elite left tackle, a star running back, and a great front seven defensively.
Did he say great front seven? Colin, I'll give you front four. I mean, it's good. I wouldn't say it's great. I mean, Dexter Lawrence is great. Kayvon's going to be great, but front seven? Our linebackers are the worst in football. I cannot even relatively agree with that. I mean, you could say Dexter Lawrence on his own is great. Yeah, sure. But front seven? Nah, that's definitely not true.
He doesn't have to win shootouts. And with that, they had 9 close wins and 1 blowout win. So the margin for the Giants, and I think you would admit, if they got a number 1 receiver, next year most Giant fans would be like, that's the missing piece. They're not a team they need another corner. They need a star receiver. I'd like to see him go get a top center in the free agent market. But this idea is Brian Dable saved a bust. This was a bust career.
Okay, that was a good argument. The close wins. The Giants had 9 wins this year. 8 of those wins, the defense held the opponent under 20 points. I agree with that. And the other win they got, they held the Packers to 22 points. So Daniel Jones in any of his wins never had to score more than 22 points. I mean, that helps a lot. But the other point I also agree with, because Joe Schoen said the exact same thing today. So maybe Joe Schoen was stealing some Colin Cowherd content. I don't know. But Joe Schoen basically said that this team is more than a wide receiver one away from being complete. And I think some fans, as I mentioned before on my own, I said this earlier in the video, some people think we're a wide receiver one away, and that's not necessarily true. It'll help, but they still need all the positions that Colin listed, center, right guard, left guard, linebackers, another corner, wide receivers, as I said, maybe a backup running back, tight end. There's so many needs for this team. It's not just, hey, let's get a wide receiver one and our problems are fixed and we're in the category with the 49ers and the Eagles and even the Cowboys. No, you need more than just that. So that part with Colin, I do agree on.
And I think Daniel Jones, in fact, if you really go, I went and looked at the numbers this morning. It's not like he's consistently good against bad defenses. He was good twice against the Vikings, but once against the Lions, he wasn't very good. He wasn't very good against Seattle's defense. So he's not even at the point that he's consistently excellent against bad defenses. He was really solid against the Vikings twice and once against the Lions. So can you be optimistic? Yes. But we do know something to be true. Every year, 7 teams that make the playoffs don't. 2 of the teams I would cancel next year, who won the most close games? Giants and Vikings. History tells you don't win 9 close games next year. I would put the Lions in, the Steelers in. There are teams I think if Denver can get like a Sean Payton, I'd put them in.
I did make this same exact point earlier, so I do obviously agree with that. Like, you guys know, I said, like, well, if, what if the ball bounced another way and the Giants went 7-9-1? Like, that was definitely possible. So, yeah, I mean, Colin pretty much said the same thing I said before in this video. And it's true. I mean, like, that's how it is, though, in the NFL. I mean, like, some teams are so dominant that they get, 12, 13, 14, 15 wins. But even the Vikings had like 13 wins, and they were all by like 7 points or less. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, you don't see that many teams do that. So the Giants are going to have people pick against them next year. That's just how it is. People are going to see all the close wins they had and think that regression's coming, and that's up to Brian Daboll and the players to, get around that and prove those people wrong, because the Giants, by some accounts, they will be expected to regress next year, and teams like, the Lions, as he mentioned, and maybe the Packers are better next year, assuming, whatever happens with them. I don't know, Jordan Love or Rodgers, whatever. But, teams like that may get better. The Rams should get better. There will be teams next year that do get better. What if the Commanders get a quarterback? They'll be better too. So you have to expect possible regression, but the Giants, of course, it's going to be up to them. They're going to see how many of these close games they can close out next year. If the Giants go from, like, let's say they were, 8-2 in close games this year, but they fall to, 4-6 in close games next year, that's the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. So that can change your entire season right there. So that's another point that I agree on.
But when I hear all this optimism, it's like you do realize at this point, Brian Daboll, the tutor, saved failing a class and got him to a C to a C minus. That's what we've got here. There's no way. Nobody thinks he's Mahomes. He's not going to ace the class. He's not going Ivy League here. That's not what we're talking about. He saved a dead career. And the save with a great coach, very good defense, star left tackle, star running back, was 15 touchdown passes. If you take the Viking games out, just the 2 Viking games, the worst defense I saw all year in the league, he threw for under 3,000 yards and 14 touchdown passes. This was a save, a kick save and a butte, as they say. The A is off the board. The B to B plus is off the board. The student's not getting that. We're praying to a B minus right now. We're a C. We're not even a C plus. J-Mac with the news. But when you haven't been good for a decade, I understand fan bases. You feel like, okay, we got it. They didn't pick up his option, right? The Giants. So, in the end, they didn't pick up that 5th-year option. Yeah. They're probably going to have to swallow hard for a year of the franchise, tag it, do whatever you got to do. But remember when Cleveland was pathetic forever and Baker gets them into the playoffs, and the following year they're awful. The reality is, and Cleveland fans were convinced this was the beginning of no, that's the Steelers, that's the Ravens. The truth, or it's Burrow and the Bengals. You're not going to win in this league with just a great coach. To get to the highest, mostly look who's left. There's one quarterback we don't know much about, Brock Purdy, and that's with a brilliant coach and literally a Pro Bowler in every single unit, both sides of the ball.
These Giants fans are a little unreasonable about Jones. They all want to keep him. I'm just going to remind Giants fans.
So they bring up a point here about, like, maybe Giants fans do overrate Daniel Jones and they're scared to move off of him. And that could be true. Both parts can definitely be true. I think some people are so afraid of possibly going back to losing like we have the past 5 years that they don't want to move off Daniel Jones. And in some cases, is that settling for mediocrity, or do you think Daniel Jones has a chance to win you a Super Bowl? Because if you're bringing Daniel Jones back, if you want Daniel Jones back as a fan for the sole reason of getting 7 to 10 wins a year and then getting bounced in the playoffs in the first 2 rounds, I would say you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But if you're a person that really believes Daniel Jones can bring you to a Super Bowl, which is a question that Joe Schoen was asked today and kind of stuttered about it, but if you think that he can bring you to a Super Bowl and win the damn thing, then I see your argument for wanting to extend Daniel Jones and go on with him. But if your argument is, well, Daniel Jones gives us a solid floor of 7 wins, like, I don't care. I don't want 7, 8 wins. Even like 9 wins. I mean, yeah, we had 9 wins this year. It was fun because we've sucked the past 5 years, been the worst team in football. But I always want championships. You guys know that. I want a team that can fight for championships year in and year out, just like the Bengals have set up and just like the Chiefs have set up and mostly the Bills and, teams like that. Philly's going to have that for a while. These teams have, and the 49ers, like the 49ers have no quarterback basically. They have some guy, some dude, and he's filling in right now because they have this amazing roster and it's working out perfectly. They have spectacular coaching, but the difference between the Niners and the Giants is that the Niners have done their rebuild since about 2016. The Giants, with Joe Schoen, this is his second offseason. They're far away from what the Niners have. Of course, Joe Schoen, he could make that happen. It's not impossible. But to have a roster as good as the Niners, it's very hard to do. As they said, they have all pros in almost every position. It's very tough to replicate what they did. So my concern is if they keep Jones, it may be settling for mediocrity. But on the other side, to be fair, as I said, right now, I don't know what other options the Giants have. You can go Derek Carr, but Derek Carr, in my opinion, is above average. I don't think Daniel Jones is much worse than Derek Carr. I'm being honest. I don't think he's that much worse. He could be better for all I know, but I don't think I'd make that move. There's just nothing out there that makes a whole lot of sense. Of course, I would take Lamar Jackson in a vacuum, but that is a insane amount of money. It's going to cost draft picks, and I just don't think the Giants would go that route. So Daniel Jones just makes the most sense right now. Now, if the Giants do have a year next year where they regress and do end up having the 6 or 7 wins, then you package picks, you move up, you get a guy next year's draft, 2024, and that's it. The argument's over. But for right now, at least, I just hope they are bringing back Daniel Jones for the right reasons. I don't want to bring him back just because he has a good floor and John Mara is afraid of having another losing season. That should not be the mindset. The mindset should be build for sustained success and build for multiple Super Bowl runs. And I think Joe Schoen knows that. I think Brian Daboll knows it. I'm afraid that our owner doesn't know that, but I think Joe Schoen hopefully does have the final say now.
Odell Beckham. Everybody loved him. He was the biggest deal in New York. I was like, this guy's starting to wobble. I don't know. I said trade him, and that's when Odell blocked me on social media.
Yeah.
The Giants waited, held too long. Remember they got a guard for Odell Beckham and then some other small things? You want to hold on to Daniel Jones and pay him. Just be careful. And let's continue here with the Giants, Colin, coming off their first playoff win since Super Bowl 46. Brian Daboll deserves a ton of credit, obviously, as you've said. But he'll have his hands full with Jalen Hurts Saturday on Fox in the divisional round. Here's what Daboll had to say about getting his team ready.
Mediocre defenses, so I think he's going to be a little bit over his skis.
I looked it up. Pro Football Focus and Football Outsiders, they grade these quarterbacks. Both of them, in about 5 different metrics, have Jones anywhere from 15th to 20th best quarterback in the league. Feels about accurate, right? He's average-ish, maybe
I would put him closer to 20.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah,
right. 18
I think most sane people outside of...
For some reason, they cut off right there. But yeah, I agree with that part. I still think he's somewhere from 15 to 20. I think it's very fair to say that. Well, I can run through the list after this. But yeah, there was a dumb part in there. Oh, they said that the Odell trade, the Giants won that trade. As much as I would hate to admit that because I loved Odell. The Giants won that trade. They got Dexter Lawrence out of it. They got an all-pro defensive tackle because of that trade. So even Kevin Zeitler was fine. All right, so you know what? For the hell of it, we're 30 minutes in. Why the hell not? So let's name 15 quarterbacks I would take right now over Daniel Jones. Now, I don't know if I want to include age and things like that. I guess we'll throw the age out because it's just best quarterbacks remaining. Screw it. All right. I'm taking Jalen Hurts. Dak is close. Dak, especially after yesterday, my God. I think it's close. I think I would take Dak, but I don't love it. I don't love it at all, but I guess that's 2. AFC East, I will take Josh Allen. I still think, Tua has too many health problems. Tua had better numbers this year, but I'll pass on that. I think it evens out. So we'll take either Tua or we'll take either Dak. So we'll take one of those guys, make it 3. I would still take Aaron Rodgers, assuming he's still playing. Jared Goff versus Daniel Jones. I'm taking... man, that's close. That's another close one. Goff's played well. He's been playing very well this year. I'll skip him for now. Kirk Cousins, 5. 6, Lamar Jackson. I think Watson gets back to close to what he was. I'll take Deshaun Watson, 7. Joe Burrow, obviously, 8. The Tom Brady, I mean, I like Brady still. I don't think he's completely washed, assuming he still wants to play, but I'll pass on that for now. Then you have Tannehill. I feel like healthy Tannehill's still better. I'll take that's 9. Trevor Lawrence. Healthy Stafford, I'm still taking. That's 11. Healthy Kyler. It's a close one. I think Kyler has proven way more over a longer stretch of time, so I think healthy Kyler would give you 12. Then we have Herbert, Mahomes, Russell Wilson. Oh my God, don't want to put Russell Wilson. I don't think Russell Wilson could be this bad going forward. I don't know. Russell Wilson's close though. And then Derek Carr. So like Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, I'll make them equal 1. So like we're around like 15 right now. And I'm kind of on the edge with guys like Jared Goff and Tua and, you know, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr. I don't know what to think about those guys. I think he's somewhere in that area. Like I think right now Daniel Jones is somewhere in the Dak, Tua, and Derek Carr area. I don't even want to include Russell Wilson because I don't know what he is. I kind of want to throw that year away for Russell Wilson and see what he is next year. But he's in like the Goff, Tua, Dak, Carr area, which, hey, like you can win with that. But as I said, you're going to need a better team around him. And I've said that since the day Jones was drafted. I compared Jones to Kansas City's Alex Smith, who was a pretty decent quarterback. So that's not like a bad comparison. I think people hated that comparison, but like it's not the worst comparison in the world. KC, of course, had Andy Reid, so great coaching. They had pretty good rosters around Alex Smith, and they were a consistent playoff team for 4 out of 5 years he was there. And, the Giants can be that way if they build the right team around Jones. But again, it comes down to the timeline. Like, how long will it take the Giants to build a great roster? Might take 2 more years, and that's the problem here. So, and that's another part about this whole thing. Like, people will say that they totally believe in Daniel Jones and blah, 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 but they also are like, well, I don't want to give him more than X amount of dollars. Like, no, if you think he's the guy, then you give him give him a big-ass contract. Like, people will say, oh, I love Daniel Jones, I think he's the future, but I don't want to give him more than $30 million per year. It's like, it's kind of like a contradiction in a way. You know what I mean? Like, I think you're trying to be smart financially, but if you think Daniel Jones is as good as you say he is, then you would have no problem giving him $40 million per year. That's what it sounds like to me. So, final thoughts. I'm fine with a 3-year deal or a 2-year deal that you can get out of after 1 year if it goes south. I would like to pay him no more than $25 million per year. I definitely prefer 20, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be a very interesting offseason. I'm sure rumors will come out, and we'll find out what happens with Saquon and Julian Love and whoever else they have up for free agency right now. So we're going to find out. It's going to be a pretty fun 2 months here, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was a longer one, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will talk to you guys next time.